On her first day at Blackwood Industries, Emma stood at the entrance, her heart beating not from nervousness, but from something far more exhilarating, anticipation. This wasn't just another job. It was the beginning of something much bigger. She was about to step into the corporate world again. But this time, things would be different. Today, she would face Ryan, the man who had once belittled her dreams, telling her she'd never make it without him. The man who had discarded her when she was nothing more than an entry-level analyst. Now, Emma was stepping back into this world, but as someone else entirely. As she passed the security desk, the guard handed her a temporary badge, Junior Executive, a title that couldn't have been further from the truth. Just a week ago, she had signed a contract for a role far more powerful than he could ever imagine. Chief Operations Officer. Ryan, still carrying himself with the same arrogance, walked past her in the hallway, oblivious to the fact that his world was about to shift. She couldn't help but suppress a smile. The irony was too delicious. He thought he still had control over her life, that his place in this company was unchallenged. But Emma knew better. Today, she wasn't just starting a new job. She was about to take back everything he tried to take from her. And he wouldn't even see it coming. Emma settled into her new desk in the open office area, surrounded by the quiet buzz of Blackwood Industries. Employees hurried past, their conversations too low to catch, but the occasional glance toward her was enough to confirm that her presence wasn't going unnoticed. They had been whispering about the mysterious new hire for weeks, some speculating that she was a game changer, others unsure of what exactly her role would be. But Emma knew the truth. They didn't know her yet. Ryan, oblivious to the change unfolding right under his nose, stood in the distance, commanding the attention of his team in his usual arrogant way. He was still the same, wearing his designer suit, gesturing dismissively as he spoke over others, and that smug look of superiority on his face, as if nothing could ever threaten his place in the company. But today, Emma was not just a bystander. She wasn't here to be a silent observer or to shrink away from him like she had years ago. No, she was here to watch the man who had once dismissed her, who had made her feel small, finally realize that the tables had turned. She could feel the tension rising as the minutes passed. The clock on the wall was ticking closer to the 10 a.m. board meeting, the one that would change everything. As she flipped through a notebook, pretending to focus, Emma could hear the murmurs of employees around her. "Did you hear about the board meeting today? Something big is happening at 10. She caught a glimpse of Ryan as he checked his phone, likely unaware of how much was riding on this moment. He was still the center of attention, his charisma filling the room, but to Emma, it all felt hollow now. Every move he made, every word he spoke, was more of a performance than anything else. And then there was the subtle shift. A message pinged on her phone from the board chairman. "Everything is set for 10 a.m. The conference room is ready." Emma's heart didn't race with nerves. Instead, there was a deep, quiet satisfaction in knowing that everything was in place. The groundwork had been laid, and soon, Ryan would see exactly how wrong he had been about her. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of executives speechless, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. Emma's gaze flicked back toward Ryan as he stood in the conference room with other department heads, his voice ringing out, full of authority. He hadn't changed a bit, still the same man who had made her feel inferior. Yet, as she watched him speak, she couldn't help but feel a sense of power bubbling inside her. Theirs was no longer a battle of equals. She had already won. She was just waiting for him to realize it. The whispers had begun, and by lunch they would know her name. But for now, Emma played her part. Quiet, modest, but ready to strike when the time was right. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward 10 a.m., and Emma sat in her seat, her fingers lightly tapping against the smooth surface of the desk. Outside her small corner of the office, the energy in the air seemed to buzz with anticipation, but she kept her focus steady, her calm demeanor the perfect mask for the storm she had been carefully preparing for. She could hear Ryan's voice floating through the walls, the usual mix of arrogance and confidence as he directed his team. They were still unaware of the shift that was about to take place, unaware that the moment of truth was now only moments away. Across the floor, the elevator doors opened, and the first few of the board members arrived. Their steps were quiet, deliberate, their faces neutral, but Emma could feel their eyes on her. They had known her for only a short time, but there was an unspoken respect in their glances, something that had taken years of hard work and strategic thinking to build. And now it was time. She could feel the familiar thrill of anticipation wash over her. Today wasn't just another corporate meeting. It was the moment she would take back everything that had been stolen from her, and then some. The conference room doors opened just as the last of the board members arrived, and Emma stood from her desk, straightening her navy suit and gathering the files she had prepared. She could feel Ryan's eyes on her, but she didn't look up. She didn't need to. The power dynamic had already shifted, and in the next few minutes, he would finally understand just how much it had changed. The corridor outside was empty, and she walked steadily toward the conference room. Her footsteps echoed against the polished floors, each click of her heels a reminder of everything she had worked for. She reached for the door handle, taking a deep breath before pushing it open. As she stepped inside, the low murmur of conversation ceased. Every single person in the room turned to look at her. Ryan, the board members, the department heads. All eyes locked on her as she entered. "Ms. Mitchell," Chairman Edwards greeted her warmly, though there was something about his expression that Emma couldn't quite place. It wasn't surprise, but something else. A quiet acknowledgement of the magnitude of what was happening. "Thank you, Chairman," Emma replied smoothly, her voice steady and calm. She had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times. But now that it was here, the reality was even sweeter than she had imagined. Ryan's gaze was fixed on her, a mix of confusion and disbelief slowly creeping across his features. She could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to make sense of the situation. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He wasn't expecting this, and Emma savored every second of his discomfort. She wasn't just here to reclaim her place in this world. She was here to dismantle everything Ryan had built on the back of her own ideas and hard work. "Please," Emma said, gesturing to an empty seat at the table, her tone polite but firm. "Shall we begin?" Ryan blinked, clearly taken aback. But before he could respond, Chairman Edwards spoke again, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Ms. Mitchell has an important announcement to make today," he said, his eyes briefly meeting Emma's. "I trust you're all prepared to hear what comes next." Emma smiled faintly as she settled into the chair. The next few minutes were crucial, and she had no intention of letting this moment slip by. Ryan, who had once made her feel like nothing, was now in the spotlight, his carefully constructed world on the brink of collapse. Emma's eyes flicked to the table in front of her, where her proposal was neatly arranged, ready to be unveiled. She cleared her throat, and without further hesitation, she began. "As many of you know, I've been working closely with the board over the past several weeks," she said, her voice carrying easily through the room. "In that time, I've had the privilege of reviewing the current operations at Blackwood Industries and assessing the future potential of this company. And what I've found has been eye-opening." Ryan's posture stiffened, and Emma could see his jaw tighten. He was trying to keep his composure, but the cracks were starting to show. The truth was, Emma had already uncovered the flaws in his management style, his outdated approach, his creative accounting, and the toxic culture he had fostered within the company. She had spent years building her case, gathering data, and putting together a plan that would revolutionize Blackwood Industries. But first, she needed Ryan to understand the depths of his own failure. "You see," Emma continued, her gaze shifting to the rest of the room, "Blackwood Industries has tremendous potential, but it's being held back by outdated practices and a leadership model that stifles innovation and growth. The numbers don't lie." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle into the room. Under the current leadership, the company has lost millions in opportunities, missed chances to innovate, to expand, to lead. Ryan's face flushed as Emma spoke, and she noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. For the first time since she had walked into this room, he seemed unsure of himself. His confidence, which had once been so unshakable, was slipping away. But Emma didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. This was her moment. "Now," she said, her voice steady and measured. "I've prepared a proposal to take Blackwood Industries into the future. One that will not only restore the company to its former glory, but elevate it to new heights." The room was silent. Everyone was waiting for the next move. Emma reached for the stack of papers in front of her, sliding them across the table to the board members. As they picked them up, their eyes scanned the documents, and the room seemed to come alive with whispers. The tension was palpable. Ryan sat frozen, his expression flickering between disbelief and something darker. Fear, perhaps. "You'll notice," Emma said, her voice low, "that this proposal includes a complete overhaul of operations. It addresses the core issues that have been holding this company back: inefficiency, lack of transparency, and a culture of fear. The goal is simple: to create a workplace that values collaboration over competition, innovation over stagnation, and leadership that empowers rather than controls." Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was no longer the center of attention. The board members were listening intently to Emma, nodding along as she spoke. It was clear to her now that they had made their choice. But Emma wasn't finished. "One of the key points of this proposal," she continued, "is restructuring the leadership team to better align with these values. A focus on innovation, transparency, and employee well-being. And I am pleased to announce that, effective immediately, I will be assuming the role of Chief Operations Officer at Blackwood Industries." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Ryan's face drained of color. His eyes darted between the board members, as if searching for someone, anyone, to back him up. But the board remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Emma looked directly at him, her gaze steady. "Ryan," she said softly, "you've been a valuable part of this company, but it's clear that the way forward requires a different kind of leadership." Ryan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Emma could see the fight draining from him, replaced by a kind of stunned disbelief. This was happening. He wasn't in control anymore. And in that moment, as she looked around the room at the faces of the board members, Emma realized just how far she had come. She had fought for this moment. She had built her reputation from the ground up, faced countless setbacks, and fought through personal and professional betrayals to get here. And now, as she sat at the head of this table, surrounded by the very people who had once doubted her, she knew she had won. The next few minutes felt like an eternity as Ryan struggled to regain his composure. He cleared his throat, attempting to speak, but his words faltered. I don't understand," he muttered, his voice wavering. "This doesn't make sense." But it made perfect sense to Emma. It was the culmination of everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about proving that success isn't built on tearing others down. It's built on lifting yourself up, even when the world tells you you're not good enough. Emma turned her attention back to the board, her expression calm but resolute. "We'll begin the restructuring process immediately," she said. "But first, I think it's time we addressed some of the discrepancies in the financial reports." As the board members leaned forward, eager to hear the details, Emma felt a surge of satisfaction. She had done it. She had taken control, and Ryan would be left to watch as everything he had worked for crumbled beneath him. The tables had turned, and there was no going back. The power had shifted, and Emma was finally where she belonged. The conference room was silent, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of paper as the board members sifted through Emma's proposal. She had expected this moment, but still the weight of it all felt surreal. The room was thick with tension, each person processing the seismic shift that had just occurred. Emma could see it in their eyes, the quiet respect, the acknowledgement of her power. But it wasn't just the board members who were affected. It was Ryan, the man who had once held all the cards, who had once looked at her as though she were nothing more than a stepping stone. was now the one left out of the game entirely. Ryan's face was pale, his usually confident demeanor now shattered. He sat in his chair, a silent figure, his fingers drumming nervously on the table in front of him. The smug arrogance that had once radiated from him now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a thin veneer of frustration and fear. He knew this was the end, and no amount of denial could change it. Emma didn't have to say anything. Her presence in the room was enough. She had already won. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that it was almost impossible to ignore. She could feel it, the shift in the air, the subtle yet undeniable way the room tilted in her favor. She was no longer the woman who had been humiliated, belittled, and dismissed. No, she was the leader now, the one with the vision, the one with the plan. She had clawed her way to this moment, and nothing would take it from her. The board members exchanged glances, and then, finally, Chairman Edwards spoke. "Ms. Mitchell's proposal will be reviewed in detail," he said, his voice steady but filled with an underlying note of approval. "But from everything we've seen today, I think we can all agree this is the direction we need to go." Emma nodded, maintaining her composure. She had expected this kind of reception, but it didn't make it any less gratifying. For a moment, she let herself feel the satisfaction of having gotten everything right. All the years of hard work, the countless hours spent strategizing and planning, all led to this moment. She had earned every inch of this victory, and now, she was going to make sure that Blackwood Industries would thrive under her leadership. Ryan, for all his bluster, wasn't going to be a part of that future. Emma could see the doubt settling in his eyes as he glanced around the room, clearly looking for some sign of support, some glimmer of hope that he could still maintain his hold on power. But no one spoke up. No one offered him an out. The silence in the room was deafening, and it was all the confirmation Ryan needed. He was done. As the meeting began to wrap up, Emma stood, her mind already shifting to the next phase of the plan. There was still so much work to do, so many changes to implement, so many ways to reshape the company and its culture. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had done it. She had outsmarted Ryan, outmaneuvered him at every turn. But more than that, she had proven something to herself. She had proven that she was worthy of the title she now held, that she could lead with authority, with vision, and with integrity. The meeting adjourned, and as the board members filed out, Emma remained behind for a moment. She needed a moment to herself, to process the enormity of what had just transpired. Her fingers traced the edge of the table, feeling the coolness of the polished surface. It was a stark contrast to the heat that had been building in her chest since she first walked through those doors. She had done it, but the work was just beginning. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave the room, she couldn't help but glance over at Ryan. He was standing by the door, his shoulders slumped, his posture defeated. He didn't even look up as she walked past him, and for a moment, Emma wondered if he realized just how much he had lost. He had once been the man who had cast doubt on her dreams, the man who had tried to tear her down. But now he was nothing more than a footnote in her story. Outside the conference room, Emma made her way to her new office. The transformation of the executive floor was already underway. New furniture, new lighting, a fresh, open layout designed to foster collaboration and creativity. It was everything Ryan had never understood, everything he had resisted. But it was exactly what the company needed. She was going to change everything, from the ground up. As Emma walked through the hallways, she could feel the eyes of the employees on her. They had all heard the rumors, felt the tension in the air, but now they were seeing the reality. The woman who had been whispered about, the one who had made a name for herself outside the company, was here to stay. And with her arrival came a new era for Blackwood Industries. One where collaboration, innovation, and growth were at the forefront. One where fear and control would no longer hold sway over the company's future. Her assistant, Amanda, was waiting for her in the new office, a stack of papers in her hand. "Everything's ready, Ms. Mitchell," she said, a look of quiet admiration in her eyes. Emma gave her a small smile, appreciating the woman's support. It wasn't easy, coming into a place where everyone had been so used to a different kind of leadership. But the changes were already starting to take root, and Emma was determined to see them through. As Emma sat at her new desk, she couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought her here. The years of hard work, the setbacks, the betrayals, all of it had led to this moment. She had been told so many times that she wasn't enough, that she wouldn't succeed, that she would never be able to break through the glass ceiling. But she had. She had fought for her place at this table, and now she was here to stay. The next few weeks would be challenging. There was so much work to do, restructuring, rebranding, reshaping the company's culture. But Emma was ready. She had a vision, and she wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. Ryan, meanwhile, had been relegated to a much smaller role within the company. Emma had made sure of it. His position had been reduced to one of minimal influence, and she made it clear that any attempt to undermine her would be met with swift action. But for now, he was on probation. His survival in the company depended on how well he could adapt to the new structure, how willing he was to let go of his old ways. As Emma looked out the window of her new office, she saw the city skyline stretching out before her. It was a beautiful sight, a symbol of everything she had achieved. And yet, she knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long, filled with obstacles and challenges. But Emma was no longer the woman who had doubted herself. She was the woman who had fought back. She was the woman who had taken control of her destiny. And she was just getting started. Back in the halls of Blackwood Industries, word began to spread. The changes Emma had promised were beginning to take shape. The new leadership structure was in place, and employees who had once felt stifled were starting to speak up, to share their ideas, to innovate. Emma's influence was everywhere, not just in the decisions she made, but in the culture she was building. For Ryan, things were much different. His desk, once the epicenter of Blackwood's operations, was now tucked away in a small, nondescript corner of the office. His once pristine office was now a relic of a time he would never get back. And as he sat there, reviewing reports, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his fall from grace. The power he had once held so effortlessly had slipped through his fingers, and he had no one to blame but himself. The truth was, Ryan had never understood leadership. He had always relied on manipulation, fear, and control to maintain his position. But Emma's leadership was different. It was based on trust, collaboration, and respect. And as the days passed, it became clear that Emma was not only going to succeed, she was going to change everything. She was going to make Blackwood Industries the company it had always been capable of becoming. And in the process, she would prove that true leadership wasn't about tearing others down. It was about lifting them up, empowering them to succeed, and creating something far greater than yourself. In the quiet of her office, Emma allowed herself a moment of peace. She had done it. She had taken the reins of Blackwood Industries, and the future was hers to shape. There was no looking back now. The past was behind her. The present was hers. And the future? The future was just beginning. The weeks that followed Emma's official appointment as Chief Operations Officer were nothing short of transformative for Blackwood Industries. Emma wasted no time making sweeping changes to the company's culture. The days of fear and competition were behind them. Instead, she fostered an environment where collaboration, transparency, and innovation could thrive. The employees, once silenced under Ryan's regime, began to speak up. Ideas flowed freely in the newly redesigned open offices, and for the first time in years, the company felt alive again. But for Ryan, the transformation was far from easy. His new role, an inconspicuous position in project assessment, was a far cry from the powerful, commanding presence he once held. He no longer had an office with a view, no longer commanded respect with a mere glance. His new desk was tucked away in a corner, surrounded by junior analysts and employees who had once been under his thumb. Now it was them who watched him, observed him, whispered about him behind his back. Every morning, Ryan walked through the doors of the office with the same meticulous care he had always given to his appearance. His suits were still expensive, still perfectly pressed, but the swagger that had once accompanied them was gone. Now he moved through the halls like a shadow of his former self, keeping his head low, his footsteps tentative. The weight of the changes Emma had introduced pressed down on him, and it was clear that he wasn't handling it well. At first, Ryan tried to maintain the facade of his old self. He would bark orders at his new team, hoping to instill some of the fear that had once worked so well for him. But his words fell flat. The young analysts didn't cower at his harsh tone. Instead, they looked at him with pity. Pity for the man who had once been the driving force behind Blackwood, now reduced to nothing more than a cog in a much larger machine. Ryan could feel their eyes on him, their judgment lingering in the air long after he passed them. They had no respect for him now, and the realization hit him like a slap in the face. Each day, Ryan struggled to adapt to the new reality. He found himself increasingly isolated in his corner of the office. His attempts to reach out to colleagues who once followed him without question were met with indifference. Even the senior executives, who had once feared him, now barely acknowledged his presence. It was as though he had become invisible. But what stung the most was the subtle shift in the way Emma handled him. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence was a weapon more effective than any words. She watched him, observed his every move, and when she did speak, it was always with that same calm confidence that seemed to strip away any remaining vestiges of his power. Emma had made it clear from the beginning that she wasn't interested in humiliating him. She didn't need to. She had already won, and Ryan knew it. His mind was constantly at war. A part of him wanted to fight back, to reclaim some of his former authority, to show Emma that he was still the man who had built this company, the one who had held the reins for so long. But every time he tried, every time he opened his mouth to make a demand, the words felt hollow. He had no power anymore. The company had shifted beneath his feet, and he was struggling to find his footing again. As the days turned into weeks, Ryan's frustration grew. He couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong. How had he, the man who once controlled everything, been reduced to this? He had been the one who had pushed Emma down, dismissed her dreams, and now she was the one in control, steering the company in a direction he could barely comprehend. One afternoon, after a particularly tense meeting where Emma had outlined the next steps for restructuring, Ryan found himself staring at his computer screen, unable to focus. The numbers blurred before his eyes, and he let out a frustrated sigh. He couldn't even bring himself to finish the report in front of him. His mind kept drifting to the past, to the day Emma had walked into the company and turned everything upside down. He thought of the words he had said to her, the cruel dismissal, the belief that she would never be able to make it on her own. But what was more painful than anything was the realization that he had been wrong. So wrong. Ryan had spent so many years thinking that power came from control, that the ability to manipulate, to command, was what made a leader. But Emma had shown him something different. She had proven that leadership wasn't about fear. It wasn't about crushing others beneath your heel. It was about trust. It was about empowering those around you, listening to their ideas, and allowing them to grow. Emma had made that clear from day one, and the results were undeniable. Under her leadership, Blackwood was thriving. The company was stronger, more innovative, and more united than it had ever been under his rule. Ryan had to admit, albeit begrudgingly, that Emma was everything he wasn't. She was a leader in every sense of the word, capable, visionary, and above all, she treated people with respect. She didn't need to resort to intimidation or manipulation. She had something he could never replicate. And it wasn't just her success that stung. It was the way she had done it, the way she had built an empire on the very principles he had discarded as weak. One afternoon, Ryan found himself in the break room, staring blankly at the coffee machine as it hummed and sputtered. He was lost in thought, wrestling with the reality of his situation when a voice broke through his reverie. Ryan! He turned to see Sarah, one of the junior analysts who had been assigned to him after the restructuring. She was standing in the doorway, a hesitant expression on her face. "Can I help you with something?" Ryan asked, his voice softer than he intended. Sarah stepped into the room, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "I just wanted to say, I've been meaning to thank you for your help on that last project. I know things have been different around here, but I wanted you to know that I appreciate everything you've taught me." Ryan blinked, momentarily taken aback by her words. For a brief moment he was silent. He had expected her to ridicule him, to show disdain, but instead, she was offering him gratitude. It wasn't the kind of praise he had once demanded. It wasn't the kind of respect he had always expected from people who feared him. It was genuine. "Thank you," he said quietly, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. "I appreciate it." Sarah smiled faintly, then turned to leave, but before she exited, she paused. "I think things are going to be better around here, Ryan. For all of us." Her words hit him like a wave, and for the first time in weeks, Ryan felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him reconsider his next move. That night, long after the office had emptied and the building had fallen silent, Ryan stayed late, staring at the reports that had once seemed like his domain. He reviewed Emma's proposal again, this time with a different perspective. He began to understand the vision she had laid out, not just for the company, but for the people working within it. He saw the potential in the changes she had implemented, the way she had turned Blackwood into a place where innovation could thrive and employees were empowered. It wasn't perfect. He could see the flaws, of course he could. He had been in charge long enough to recognize them. But it was a start. It was a foundation that had been built on something more solid than the house of cards he had once erected. Emma had built her success on trust, on respect, and on collaboration. It was a model he had never understood, but now he was beginning to see its merits. For the first time in his life, Ryan didn't want to fight. He didn't want to claw his way back to the top using the same old tactics. He was tired, exhausted from the games he had played, the lies he had told. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way to succeed. A better way. Ryan knew he had a long way to go. He had a lot to learn. But for the first time in years, he was ready to listen. Ready to change. And it started with Emma. The next day, Ryan walked into the office a different man. His shoulders were no longer stiff with pride, no longer weighed down by the need to prove himself. He was no longer trying to reclaim his former glory. He was simply trying to find his place in a world that had moved on without him. And maybe, just maybe, there was still room for him there. The days after Emma's first major restructuring efforts passed in a blur of meetings, new projects, and a palpable shift in the culture at Blackwood Industries. It was a transformation that didn't just affect the company. It had touched every individual who worked there. Employees, once wary of change, began to embrace the new policies. Emma had made it clear from the start that this was a collective effort. Together, they would build a future that valued their contributions, their ideas, and their commitment. No more would the company be a place where fear ruled the hallways, where people kept their heads down, too scared to speak up. Now there was light, there was space to breathe, and there was hope. But the real test of Emma's leadership, the true challenge that would define her legacy, was yet to come. She knew it wouldn't be enough to simply introduce new policies and watch them unfold. The company's culture had shifted, but culture wasn't something that could be created overnight. It had to be nurtured, protected, and constantly challenged. The vision she had set in motion needed to be more than just a plan. It needed to become the beating heart of Blackwood, and that was a responsibility she could not take lightly. As Emma sat at her desk, staring out over the floor, she felt the weight of the position she had claimed. It was a weight she had worked for, a weight she had earned, but still it was heavy. Leadership wasn't about being at the top. It was about being at the forefront, guiding those who followed you. It was about giving people the opportunity to shine. And she knew that with great power came even greater responsibility. The phone on her desk buzzed, breaking her thoughts. Amanda's voice crackled through the receiver, a touch of excitement in her tone. "Emma, the team is ready for your review of the quarterly results. They're expecting your feedback at the all-hands meeting this afternoon." Emma smiled as she pressed the speaker button on her phone. "Great, let's get the latest figures over to me. And let's make sure everyone is ready for the discussion." As she waited for the numbers to appear on her screen, Emma's mind wandered to the bigger picture. In the weeks since her arrival, she had seen the company grow in ways she had only dreamed of. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. Innovation had surged, with new ideas and groundbreaking projects being presented by employees who had once been too intimidated to contribute. Blackwood Industries was becoming everything it could be, everything Emma had always known it could be. But there was still more to do. Emma leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk as she prepared herself for the afternoon's meeting. There was one major challenge she hadn't yet tackled: Ryan. The shift in leadership had been monumental, but she could feel the residual tension whenever he entered the room. The other employees, while respectful, still watched him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. They wanted to know if he would finally change or if he would slip back into old habits. But for Emma, the real question wasn't whether he would change. It was whether she could bring him into the fold, help him understand the true meaning of leadership, and show him that his worth didn't come from his position, but from his ability to contribute in a way that empowered those around him. The room filled quickly as employees began filing into the all-hands meeting. Emma stood, her posture straight, her demeanor calm but commanding. There was no need for a dramatic entrance. Her presence was enough. When she spoke, people listened, and she intended to make sure they understood the importance of the conversation they were about to have. The lights dimmed as the projector clicked on, and the first slide of the presentation appeared. I want to start by thanking all of you for your dedication, your hard work, and your commitment to making Blackwood the company it is today. We've made great strides and we've accomplished a lot together. But this is just the beginning. We're building something new, something that has the potential to change everything. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. Emma knew that this moment was more than just a quarterly update. It was a reaffirmation of the vision she had put in place. It was a chance to remind everyone of what they were working toward and to solidify the company's values in a way that would carry them forward. The slides continued, outlining the company's growth, the increase in productivity, and the successes that were beginning to unfold. But there was one part of the presentation that Emma was particularly excited about. It was a new initiative, one that would take Blackwood's culture of collaboration even further. A company-wide mentorship program designed to encourage employees to share their knowledge, to lift each other up, and to create opportunities for growth at all levels. This is where I see the future of Blackwood, Emma said, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the gazes of everyone present. Leadership is about more than just power. It's about empowering others. It's about recognizing that we all have something valuable to contribute and lifting each other up to achieve our goals together. Ryan sat toward the back of the room, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Emma could feel his gaze on her, but she didn't flinch. She knew that this was as much about him as it was about the rest of the team. The message was clear. Blackwood was changing, and Ryan had to either adapt or risk being left behind. The meeting continued, with employees asking questions and discussing the future of the company. Emma's answers were confident, precise, and filled with the kind of vision that had already made her a leader in their eyes. She wasn't just telling them what to do. She was showing them the path forward, and they were eager to walk it with her. At the end of the meeting, Emma made one last announcement. As part of our continued commitment to innovation and collaboration, we'll be holding quarterly feedback sessions. I want to hear from each of you, from every department, so that we can continue to grow and improve. This is a company where every voice matters. The room erupted in applause, a sea of approval and gratitude. Emma felt the warmth of their appreciation, but she didn't let it distract her. This was just another step on a long road. As the employees began to file out, Emma caught Ryan's eye. For a moment, their gazes locked, and she could see something in his eyes that wasn't there before. There was no arrogance, no resentment. There was only something that resembled humility. Ryan had always been proud, but now he was beginning to see the value of what Emma had done, of what she was building. It wasn't easy, but he was starting to realize that the path forward wasn't about trying to reclaim lost glory. It was about accepting a new role, one that allowed him to grow, to learn, and to contribute in a way that would support the future of Blackwood. Emma knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. There would be more challenges, more tests of her leadership. But in that moment, as she watched the employees file out of the room, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had done it. She had built something real, something lasting. And she had done it by staying true to herself, by believing in the power of collaboration and trust, and by refusing to compromise on her values. The future of Blackwood was brighter than ever, and Emma knew that, as long as they stayed true to the principles that had guided her leadership, there was no limit to what they could accomplish. Ryan, who had once thought himself invincible, was now just another part of the team, his place in the company no longer defined by dominance but by his willingness to evolve. And though it would take time, Emma had faith that he would find his place within the new vision of Blackwood. Because true leadership wasn't about tearing others down, it was about lifting them up, helping them find their strength, and working together to build something that would last. As Emma stood by the window, watching the city below, she knew one thing for sure. Success wasn't just about achieving your goals. It was about bringing others with you, about leaving a legacy that would outlast you. And in that moment, Emma realized that she was creating something far more powerful than any victory over Ryan. She was creating a future that would be defined by the strength of every person at Blackwood, working together toward a common goal. And that, Emma thought, was the true measure of leadership. Ryan sat in his new office, a space much smaller than his previous one, tucked in a corner of the building. The walls were lined with bright, modern decor, and the desk was filled with reports and new responsibilities that seemed to stretch endlessly in front of him. Despite the simplicity of his new role, there was a sense of quiet pride that had settled within him over the last few weeks. A part of him still felt the sting of losing his power, of watching as Emma swiftly took control of Blackwood Industries. But another part of him, a part that had been dormant for far too long, was beginning to awaken. Emma had given him a second chance, a chance to change. The moment he realized this wasn't a punishment, but an opportunity to transform himself, something inside him shifted. He had spent so many years hiding behind his arrogance, clinging to a false sense of superiority. But under Emma's leadership, he was learning to lead in a different way, a way that he had never considered before. She had shown him that power wasn't about dominance, it was about empowering others. The first few days in his new role had been difficult. At first, the transition had been awkward. Ryan, who had once been the one giving orders, was now receiving them. He was no longer the one at the center of attention in meetings. Instead, he had to listen, absorb, and contribute when asked. It was humbling. He had always been the one at the front of the room, the one making decisions, but now he was learning to follow, to listen, and to let go of the need to control everything. But it wasn't easy. Ryan had always relied on his sharp tongue and his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. The sudden absence of that power felt disorienting. He still struggled to adjust to the shift in the company's dynamics. Every time he tried to assert himself, he was met with polite indifference. The employees who once feared him were now colleagues, and they weren't impressed by his old methods. They were more interested in collaboration than in hierarchy, and that was a lesson Ryan was slowly starting to learn. Over time, though, he began to see the benefits of the new system. At first, he had doubted Emma's approach. He had scoffed at the idea of employee empowerment, of collaboration being more important than sheer power. But now, as he worked alongside his team, he could see the results. The company was flourishing in ways he hadn't anticipated. Productivity was up, innovation was at an all-time high, and the atmosphere in the office had completely transformed. People were excited to come to work again, to share their ideas, and to collaborate on projects. The very culture that Emma had instilled in Blackwood was beginning to take root, and it was thriving. Ryan's relationship with Emma, too, began to change. At first, their interactions were cordial but distant. He could feel the unspoken tension between them, a result of their past. Emma had every reason to resent him, and he had no illusions about how he had treated her. He had been arrogant, dismissive, and downright cruel. But she didn't hold it against him, not openly. Instead, Emma was patient with him, allowing him the space to evolve at his own pace. She never once rubbed her success in his face, never once mocked him for his past actions. She simply allowed him to witness the results of her leadership, and in doing so, she silently challenged him to become a better version of himself. One afternoon, a few months after the restructuring had begun, Ryan found himself standing in front of Emma's office. He had never thought he would be here, standing outside her door, ready to speak with her as a colleague rather than an adversary. He knocked gently, his heart beating a little faster than he had expected. He had come to terms with the fact that he needed to change, but that didn't make asking for help any easier. "Come in." Emma's voice came through the door, calm and confident. Ryan stepped inside, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Emma," he said, the words feeling awkward on his tongue. "I wanted to talk to you about something." She looked up from her desk, giving him a brief but welcoming smile. "Of course, Ryan. What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to phrase it. "I've been thinking about, well, everything, the changes, the way things are going around here. I see now that you were right. I've been too focused on the wrong things." Emma didn't interrupt, didn't rush him. She simply waited, her eyes steady on him, giving him the space he needed. "I've been holding on to power for so long, thinking that was the only way to lead. But now I see that leadership is about something else entirely. It's about trust. It's about empowering the people around you, not controlling them." Ryan paused, the weight of his words settling between them. He could see the quiet satisfaction in Emma's eyes, not because she had won, but because she knew exactly what he was realizing. "I'm not the same person I was when I first walked into this company," he continued. "I want to be part of the future you're building here. I want to contribute, not just to the company's success, but to the people who make it run." Emma leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "I've seen the changes in you, Ryan," she said softly. "You're learning, and that's what matters." Ryan nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He had spent so many years trying to prove himself, trying to maintain control, that he hadn't realized what true leadership required. Emma had shown him that it wasn't about being at the top, it was about bringing others with you, lifting them up, and creating something bigger than just one person. From that moment on, Ryan's role within Blackwood began to evolve in ways he hadn't expected. He started working more closely with the team, collaborating with his peers rather than commanding them. He found himself listening more than speaking, learning from those around him. He was no longer the top dog in the room, but that was okay. The power he had once craved had lost its appeal. Instead, he found a new kind of fulfillment in helping others succeed, in guiding them rather than controlling them. Over the next few months, Ryan took on more responsibility. He led a new project team, this time focusing on fostering innovation across departments. Under Emma's leadership, the company had placed a new emphasis on cross-departmental collaboration, and Ryan was tasked with overseeing this initiative. It was a daunting responsibility, but one that Ryan approached with newfound humility. He knew that success didn't come from dictating orders. It came from empowering those around you, from creating a space where people felt valued and heard. Ryan's transformation was not instantaneous. It took time, effort, and a willingness to let go of old habits. But with each passing day, he became more comfortable in his new role. His colleagues, once skeptical of his motives, began to see the sincerity in his efforts. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that made all the difference. Emma watched Ryan's transformation with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had known from the beginning that he had the potential to change, but she also knew that change had to come from within. She had offered him the space to evolve, but it was up to him to seize the opportunity. And he had. As the months passed, Blackwood Industries continued to grow. Under Emma's leadership, the company was flourishing. The changes were evident in every aspect of the business, from the way employees interacted with one another to the innovative products and services that were being developed. The company was on track to become a leader in its industry, and Emma's leadership was at the heart of that success. But Ryan's role in the company's success was becoming increasingly apparent. His project team had exceeded expectations, delivering groundbreaking results that helped propel Blackwood to new heights. His ability to collaborate, to listen, and to empower others had made all the difference. He had found his place within the company, not as the one in charge, but as a leader who led by example, who guided others rather than controlling them. One day, as Emma walked through the halls of Blackwood, she passed by Ryan's office. He was sitting at his desk, working with his team, engaged in a deep conversation. She paused for a moment, watching him. There was no arrogance in his posture, no need to dominate the conversation. He was listening, guiding, and helping his team find solutions. It was a far cry from the man he had been when she first walked into the company. Emma smiled to herself as she continued down the hall. Ryan had come a long way, and in doing so, he had helped Blackwood come even farther. The company wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving, and that was a testament to the power of transformation, of growth, and of leadership that didn't just seek to control but to uplift. As Emma stood by her window, looking out over the city, she knew that the future of Blackwood was secure. The company had grown stronger, more innovative, and more collaborative than ever before. And at the heart of that success was not just Emma's vision, but the collective effort of every person in the company, including Ryan. Together, they had built something lasting, something powerful. And Emma knew that this was only the beginning. The best was yet to come. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the office window, Emma began to feel that something wasn't quite right. She couldn't explain it, but a dull headache and a shortness of breath made her uneasy. Sitting at her desk, she tried to focus on the reports in front of her, but her condition kept getting worse. A few hours later, Emma found herself in a state of exhaustion, and the decision to rest became inevitable. By the time she called her assistant, Amanda, and explained that she wouldn't be able to continue working that day, Emma had already realized that something more serious was at play. With a light fever and increasing fatigue, she was advised to rest. She knew, deep down, that the next few weeks would be a blur of doctor's visits and recovery time. As Emma stayed home to recover from a serious illness, Blackwood Industries was left in a delicate position. Unable to oversee the company's operations for the foreseeable future, Emma had no choice but to temporarily step back from her duties. It was a time of uncertainty for the company, and someone needed to step in to fill her shoes. To Emma's surprise, that person was none other than Ryan. For the first time since his demotion, Ryan took charge of Blackwood Industries, handling everything with remarkable efficiency. Though Emma had initially been skeptical about his ability to manage things without her, she soon realized that he was more than capable. Throughout her illness, she received reports, daily updates, and constant communication about the progress being made. Ryan ran meetings, made decisions, and kept the company moving forward. To Emma's surprise, he handled everything seamlessly, and the employees who had once feared him were now rallying behind him. It was a testament to the fact that Ryan was growing, adapting, and stepping into a new role. As Emma slowly recovered, she found herself reviewing Ryan's decisions, and she had to admit that he had managed the company well in her absence. She could see that the environment had shifted. Ryan was no longer the same leader he had been before. He had let go of his need to control every situation, and instead, he focused on listening, collaborating, and empowering his team. Throughout the month of her absence, Emma came to realize that Ryan had changed. The company had flourished under his leadership in ways she hadn't anticipated. The atmosphere had shifted from one of tension to one of cooperation. Ryan was running the company with an approach Emma had always hoped for, one that didn't rely on domination, but rather on trust and respect. One day, when Emma felt well enough to leave the house, she received a call from Ryan. His voice, though still carrying the weight of authority, had a softness to it. "How are you feeling, Emma?" he asked, genuine concern evident in his tone. "I'm getting better," Emma replied, touched by his inquiry. "I'm surprised by how smoothly things have gone while I've been out." "You've done a great job, Ryan." Ryan paused before speaking again, his voice tinged with something unexpected. "I didn't want you to be out for so long, but I had to do what needed to be done. I didn't expect everything to go this well, but I think we've managed." Emma smiled. "I'm impressed. You've done more than just manage. You've taken the company forward. I wasn't expecting that." The brief silence between them was comfortable, and in that moment, Emma realized how far Ryan had come. He had always been confident, but now, there was a humility to him that hadn't been there before. It was as if he had shed the weight of his past arrogance and was stepping into something new, a new version of leadership, and perhaps a new version of himself. As the weeks passed and Emma's health continued to improve, she began to notice more subtle changes in Ryan. He wasn't the same domineering figure he had once been. He still carried himself with professionalism, but now he was more thoughtful, more considerate. He wasn't quick to make decisions without consulting others, and when he did speak, his words were no longer laced with arrogance. Emma had always known that Ryan had the potential to change, but now, she saw the evidence of it firsthand. One day, when Emma returned to the office after her month-long absence, she was met with a warm reception from the employees. They had all been impressed by Ryan's leadership, and many of them expressed their appreciation for how well he had kept things running. As she walked through the halls, she felt a sense of pride, not just for the company's progress, but for Ryan's personal transformation. He had managed to create an environment where people felt valued, where their ideas were heard, and where innovation was encouraged. It was the kind of environment Emma had always wanted for Blackwood. After one particularly successful project review meeting, Emma and Ryan found themselves alone in her office. Ryan had worked tirelessly alongside her team to ensure that the new initiative was not only successful but exceeded expectations. Emma looked at him with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "Ryan," she began, her voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I have to admit, I didn't expect this. You've really stepped up in ways I couldn't have imagined. You've changed, and it's not just in your approach to work. I can see it in you, your attitude, your demeanor. You've grown." Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat but didn't look away. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I owe a lot of it to you, Emma. I was arrogant. I thought I could control everything, that my way was the only way. But I've learned a lot over the past few months about leadership, about respect, and about what it really means to run this company. It's not about being in charge. It's about bringing out the best in others." Emma nodded thoughtfully, her eyes locking with his. There was something in his expression now, something she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just gratitude. It was respect. She could see it in the way he carried himself, in the way he spoke, and in the way he had treated everyone around him. He had genuinely transformed, and it wasn't just for the company, it was for himself. There was a long pause before Emma spoke again. "I'm proud of you, Ryan. You've proven that you're capable of so much more than I ever thought possible." Ryan met her gaze, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. The professional barrier that had once separated them, that had always been in place, was no longer there. They were two people who had fought for something greater than themselves. They had fought for the success of the company, for the vision they both shared. And in doing so, they had found something else, a respect, a partnership, and perhaps something more. "I've learned a lot from you, Emma," Ryan said quietly, his voice softer than it had ever been. "And I'm not just talking about leadership. I'm talking about life. You've shown me what it means to really lead, to truly care about the people around you. And it's made me want to be better, both for the company and for myself." Emma smiled softly. "We're all works in progress, Ryan, but you've made incredible strides. And I think you're going to continue surprising yourself." Ryan's expression softened, and for the first time, there was a look of sincerity in his eyes. Something deep, something real. "Maybe it's not just about leading the company anymore. Maybe it's about figuring out what really matters. And what really matters, Emma, is making sure we're both in this together." There was a quiet pause between them, and Emma felt something shift in the air. It wasn't just the unspoken understanding between them. It was something deeper, something she hadn't quite realized until that moment. Maybe, just maybe, the respect they had built for one another had started to grow into something more. As the days passed, their professional relationship continued to evolve. They worked together seamlessly, their partnership strengthening with each passing challenge. But there was something more now, an unspoken connection, a subtle understanding that perhaps this was the beginning of something neither of them had anticipated. Their respect for each other had laid the foundation, but Emma couldn't deny the growing feelings she had started to develop. And maybe, just maybe, Ryan felt the same way. The future of Blackwood was bright, not just because of the company's success, but because of the unexpected growth they had both experienced. Together, They had built something powerful. A company that thrived on innovation, collaboration, and respect. And perhaps, in time, they would build something else. Something that wasn't just about business, but about two people who had changed each other's lives in ways they never saw coming. But for now, the road ahead was open. Emma and Ryan, both transformed and both stronger than ever, were ready to face whatever came next. Together,